Dragons, bitches. You know, dragons, giant fire-breathing lizards. Sometimes wise, sometimes ferocious, sometimes voiced by Eddie Murphy, but almost always cool as hell. So today I've compiled a list of over 20 different dragons from movies, television, comic books, video games, so we can finally figure out once and for all which ones are the coolest. A couple of stipulations though. First, I have not watched enough Game of Thrones to have any of those on this list. I just am not familiar with it very much at all. Second, I won't be including Pokemon because that just opens up like a whole can of worms that I don't really want to get into in this list. And lastly, I tried to stick with one dragon per series or show because I just don't want things to get too overcrowded, with one exception, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Let's kick things off with one of the most iconic dragons out there. Dragon, Shrek. Firstly, her real name is actually Elizabeth, as we found out in Shrek 2. But for the sake of my childhood and keeping things cohesive, we're just going to refer to her as Dragon. She's definitely a bit of a badass, and definitely one of the most iconic dragons of my childhood. Absolutely classic design, which works really well for the whole Shrek universe, since she's basically like a classic fairy tale dragon come to life. She's menacing and powerful when she needs to be, but also kind and sweet and helpful to her friends. Going first from a villain that Shrek and Donkey have to escape from to saving the day at the end of the movie. Outside of the whole like castle rescue sequence in the first movie, she doesn't really have much like epic or awe-inspiring moments. Also, she spends the next 3 movies fucking a donkey. So I think that's points off. I think Dragon is fun and iconic and definitely one of the most memorable for me personally, but probably not the coolest out there, so I'm thinking a B tier. Balthroma, Rick and Morty. So design-wise, this guy is sick. Big wings, fire-breathing, the whole shebang. Personality-wise, though, he's lame as hell. Which I will say is kind of the point of the whole episode, giving you this badass dragon that turns out to just be whiny and lame. He spends more time complaining than doing like anything cool. Plus, he's just a bit too horny for my liking, constantly trying to soul bond with anyone and everyone. Like, calm down, dude. Drink some water, man. Too thirsty. He's funny and works perfectly as like a parody of your classic fantasy dragons, but in reality, he's pretty lame. I'm probably going to go C tier. Fang from Avatar. We get a couple of dragons throughout the Avatar series, but Fang was always the one that sort of stood out to me the most as a kid. Even though he primarily exists in like flashbacks and as a spirit guide, just the like wisdom and legacy that he brings every single time he shows up is just so awesome. He might not have any like real epic moments throughout the show, but every time that he shows up, his presence just feels like otherworldly. He's a companion to one of the past avatars, Roku, and his original story ends with him trying to save Roku's life by sacrificing himself. But in doing so, it allows him to enter the spirit world and eventually guide Aang through it. He's big and majestic and ancient and wise, and while he might not be like as cool as some of the others on this list, I've always really liked him. I'm gonna say B tier. Devon and Cornwall, Quest for Camelot. Listen, are these two knuckleheads absolutely iconic? For sure. Are they cool? Not really. In theory, a 2-headed dragon should be cool as hell. That's 2 dragons for the price of 1. That's a fucking BOGO. And they can like breathe fire and stuff when they work together, but their entire arc pretty much revolves around them trying to learn how to do so and culminates in like a big musical duet. Not exactly like peak dragon cool. They spend most of the movie as comic reliefs, pretty much bickering and arguing the whole time and cracking jokes. Nostalgic and funny 100%, but not really that cool. Sorry guys, I think you're first on our D tier. Spyro. Now, Spyro may be small, but he's got enough attitude and power to more than make up for it. I'm going to be honest, I absolutely love these games. I grew up on them, played them constantly, so I'm probably going to be a bit biased. But personally, I think Spyro is so fucking cool. He's got all the classic dragon abilities like flying, fire breathing, headbutting the shit out of everything in his path. But down the road, he can also attain like ice and electric powers, which is inherently cool. He might not be as like big and menacing as a lot of his dragon counterparts, but he still always manages to get the job done and save the day while being funny and really fun to play as. An absolute icon to basically anybody that grew up in this time period. And remember, this isn't the most powerful dragons, this is the coolest, and I think Spyro might take the cake on that. Spyro's going on S tier. Draco, DragonHeart. This might be kind of a weird pull depending on which weird-ass movies your parents made you watch as a kid, but DragonHeart was one of those for me, and I had a tiny obsession with it. The movie itself might be a bit too cheesy for some people's taste, but even with the wonderful technology of 1996 movie making, Draco still managed to look pretty fucking cool. He's huge and intimidating and majestic and powerful. But he's not just like a mindless fire-breathing beast either. He's wise and noble and heroic, and can even be kind of like sarcastic and funny at times, but not like too much to the point where he's like a comedic character. He's basically at the heart of the entire movie, and I don't want to spoil like a 30-year-old movie for you guys in case you haven't seen it, but he's absolutely a hero and more than willing to do whatever it takes to save the day. I don't think he's quite cool enough to make it to the top of the list, but I think he comes pretty damn close, so I'm going to say A tier. Elliot, Pete's dragon. First things first, I have not seen the live action one, so we're going to be sticking solely with like the 1970s movie. Elliot is a dragon that's less worried about like being fierce and powerful and more focused on being friendly and nice, which is awesome in its own right. Like there's always a place for that, but it doesn't really make for a cool dragon. His design is even made to make him seem like big and lovable and huggable, but it comes down to him basically being like a giant stuffed animal with wings. He's sweet and lovable and wholesome, but not that cool. I think Elliot goes on C tier. Mushu, Mulan. Mushu's definitely not like big and tough or anything, but he's pretty cool in like his own sarcastic, comedic sort of way. He's definitely not like the classic majestic dragons that you usually picture, but more charismatic and funny with huge personality. When we first meet him, he's like disgraced and looked down upon, but by the end of the movie, he's revered as a hero by the ancestors that used to look down on him. He's got a bit of fire breathing, is basically indestructible, but he's not really like a badass or anything. More of a smooth talking, energetic lizard who can puff a bit of fire. That being said, he's super entertaining and a blast to watch on screen. I think I'm gonna go with a B tier. Falkor, Never Ending Story. Another movie that young me was basically obsessed with. In a film filled with magical creatures and mystical elements, nothing is really quite as breathtaking or awe-inspiring as when we see Falkor. He's not only absolutely a gigantic, but also comes across as graceful and elegant and just full of wisdom. Instead of being like intimidating or fearsome, he comes across more as like powerful and majestic, but in this magical sort of way. Instead of breathing fire or anything, he has luck powers, which brings good fortune to anyone around him. So he's sort of more of like a positive force than a destructive one. I personally think Falkor is just legendary and absolutely awesome, without even having any of these same traits that a lot of the other dragons do. He just seems bigger than life and is going to the top of the list for me. S tier. Fang Foom, Marvel. Kind of a stupid name, but a pretty badass dragon. He's absolutely massive and pretty much unstoppable at times, possessing all the usual dragon powers, you know, like flight, strength, fire, but also being telepathic, able to shapeshift not only his own size, but into any other animals as well. There's been a few instances in his long run of comics where he's been sort of like goofy and quirky, but there's been other moments where he's just absolutely a force to be reckoned with and massive and intimidating and powerful. Kind of like a mixed bag here, but that's pretty much what you get when you've been around for so long. But I think his massive size and just his presence makes him a good contender here. And there's definitely been plenty of the moments where he's just cool as hell. I think I'm feeling an A tier. The Great Protector, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I know some people sort of like fell off the MCU bandwagon after Endgame, but as somebody who was still on board and enjoying the shit out of this movie the first time I watched it, when the Great Protector shows up for the first time, I was stoked. This isn't some like little buddy dragon that shows up and starts cracking jokes. No, this is an absolute force of power and strength that shows up to save the day in the time of need. But that third act fight when she shows up with Shang-Chi riding her to fight off the evil, so fucking cool. Using her power and her strength to help fight off the bad guys, but also shown to be sort of like wise and caring, especially in the scene where she like gives Shang-Chi bubbles underwater so he can breathe. Like that's super fucking smart. Why is this dragon so smart? Honestly, the scenes with the Great Protector might be some of my favorite moments in the past like 10 MCU movies. It was just completely out of left field, but so cool to watch. Great movie, fantastic dragon. I'm gonna go S tier. Lockheed, X-Men. The longtime companion of Kitty Pryde in the comics, Lockheed is a bit more on like the Spyro and Mushu side of things. Not very big or majestic, but more than makes up for it with how loyal he is. And he tends to be pretty powerful for his size. He is more of like a sidekick or a pet than like an actual hero, but he has saved the day from time to time. He can fly, breathe fire, can understand human speech, and is actually immune to telepathy, even from Professor X. He might not be as like menacing or powerful as some of these others, but he can be just as fierce and brave, even if he's the size of a house cat. Lockheed's decently cool. Let's say B tier. Norberta, Harry Potter. Originally thought to be Norbert until they eventually realized that she's a girl in the books, although the movies never really clarify it. Norberta was a dragon that was hatched by Hagrid that he eventually had to give up when it became too big and a little bit more aggressive. However, for the most part, especially in the movies, she's pretty cute, even for a dragon. She's mischievous and causes a lot of chaos, but she's also pretty fun and memorable. Nothing really like epic or cool here, more of just like a novelty character that shows up to sort of make the world feel more magical. I'm gonna go C tier. Sisu, Raya and the Last Dragon. Unlike a lot of dragons, Sisu doesn't have like massive wings or even fire breathing capabilities due to the fact that she's a water dragon. So she's able to manipulate water, but she's also got shape-shifting abilities and just like general dragon magic. She's fun and loving and quirky and just kind of like a bit of a goofball. But when it comes down to it, she can also be fierce and brave and majestic. And while she spends a lot of the movie like cracking jokes or just trying to have fun, she's also incredibly wise and trusting, which ends up being what saves the day. She's like optimistic and pure of heart, but in like an endearing way that can be a lot of fun to watch. Her design is like sleek and graceful, but she's got this powerful presence still, even while being incredibly kind to everybody. She's kind of like a good mix of being like both majestic and lovable. I think she goes on A tier. Smaug, the Hobbit. Smaug is like the pure embodiment of what everybody thinks of when they think of a dragon. Gigantic, terrifying, and just this huge imposing presence while also being incredibly cunning and intelligent. One of the most iconic dragons in any medium, and for good reason. He's nearly unstoppable, incredibly powerful, and just like the ultimate classic dragon. Just an absolute legend. This is the dragon that all other dragons wish they were. Smaug goes on S tier, no argument. Shenron, Dragon Ball. Now, as I've discussed before, I didn't really grow up watching too much anime, so I never really got too deep into Dragon Ball. But in doing my research for this guy kept coming up, so I figured I'd look into it. And I gotta say, pretty fucking cool. Also known as the Eternal Dragon or the Dragon God, Shenron is more of like a neutral figure that grants wishes rather than like a fighting dragon. Although he has had to defend himself multiple times throughout the run of the show. But even just looking at the design for this guy, it's like, that's a pretty cool dragon right there. Like, his design alone just makes him seem otherworldly and powerful and bigger than life. And I think his wish-granting capabilities make him more powerful than almost any other dragon on the list. I'm not, like, super versed on Dragon Ball, you know, not quite there. But just from what I've seen so far, I think he's pretty rad. I'm gonna go with an A tier. But maybe that'll change eventually once I watch more of the show. Dragon Ball fans, let me know if you think I'm right or if you think he should go higher. But be nice about it. Or don't, I don't care. Maleficent, Sleeping Beauty. While not originally a dragon, she turns herself into one at the climax of the movie. And boy oh boy, is she a dragon. Towering and terrifying, able to fly, breathe fire, and just radiating pure evil and fear itself. The design alone is super iconic, looking sleek and dark with the big horns and the glowing eyes. I gotta say, she's pretty cool in her dragon form and definitely one of the most memorable out there. Look at like any Disney-centered video game, guarantee at some point in it, you gotta fight this dragon. I don't think I'd put her at the very top of the list, but she's a pretty high contender, so I'm gonna go A tier. Sapphira, Eragon. As a kid, I was a pretty big fan of the Eragon book series, which means I was also immensely disappointed when the movie came out. But that's not the point here. Sapphira, the main dragon in the book, should be pretty cool. Like, for the most part, she's your average dragon, you know, she's got the fire breathing, the flying, she's big, majestic. She's even got telepathy. Plus, the bond that she shares with Eragon is basically the crux of the entire series. But honestly, even with the shitty adaptation aside, she's kind of boring. Like, outside of the whole bonding thing, she's pretty much just like a generic dragon. Like, I remember loving these books as a kid. I can't remember anything specifically about this dragon that stood out to me. If you grew up loving these books, she might have a special place in your heart. But I personally don't think she's nearly as iconic as pretty much any other dragon on this list. I liked her a lot as a kid, but as an adult, I'm gonna say C tier. Ord, Cassie, Zack, and Wheezy, Dragon Tales. Now, I decided to keep these guys grouped together. As a kid, I loved this show and I watched it all the time, so it just didn't feel right to like separate them or only do one of them. That being said, these guys are lame as hell. All of them. Ord's probably the coolest, you know, he's like the big blue one, but even then, he's basically like Barney with wings. These guys aren't like breathing fire or fighting off knights or even hoarding treasure. Instead, they're teaching kids about their feelings and friendship. Fucking dorks. You put these guys up against like any other dragon on this list, they're probably going to get eaten. Sure, they're fun and sweet and nostalgic, but not very cool at all. Gonna go D tier. King Ghidorah, Godzilla. Here we have another one of the most iconic dragon designs of all time. A three-headed monstrosity that's so fearsome and brutal and evil that he makes Godzilla into the good guy. This is like a god tier villain, just an absolute force to be reckoned with. Anytime that he shows up, it's basically like a world-ending scenario. He's destructive, powerful, and just an absolute legend. He doesn't really have like much of a personality or anything, just being like a powerful force of nature that's there to cause chaos and destruction. But just on his power and his design alone, he's got to go top tier. So we're going S tier. Toothless, How to Train Your Dragon. Now, if this was like cutest dragons, Toothless probably takes the cake. I mean, come on, this guy is adorable. But don't let that cuteness factor fool you. He's got a decent amount of power behind him too. He's got the fire blast, the flight, he's pretty speedy and stealthy too. And while at times he can be like playful and a bit goofy, he can also be pretty fierce and ferocious when he needs to be too. He's sort of like a Swiss Army knife of a dragon, like a jack of all trades. He's playful and goofy and brave and powerful. And I think his design is really cool too. You know, it's unique. He looks more of like a cat than anything else. I think Toothless is great. I don't think he's quite the coolest though, so we're going to go A tier for him. And last up, we've got Jake Long, American Dragon Jake Long. Now, let's just take a look at the first two words of the theme song here. He's cool. Can't really argue with that. Well, maybe a little bit. Like, for a mid-2000s Disney Channel show, yeah, he's super cool. Compared to some of these other guys, though, he kind of comes off a bit of a dork. Not only in his human form, but even in his dragon form too. He's still young, so he's learning how to do everything, you know, both as a human and a dragon. So he's pretty constantly embarrassing himself and messing up. He does have all like the usual dragon stuff, you know, like flight and fire breathing. And honestly, I think he looks super cool. Like his design is super sleek. I was especially a fan of the redesign that he got later on in the show. Personality wise, there's nothing really wrong per se. Like sure, he sounds more like he should be hanging out at the skate park instead of protecting the world, but he's still often pretty heroic and usually comes through to save the day. But he's more than likely gonna do something embarrassing along the way. I think as a kid, I thought Jake Long was pretty cool, but as an adult, looking back on it, it's kind of like, I think he just thinks he's the coolest dragon, but we're gonna put him on B tier. And there you have it, my list of the coolest dragons. You know what I learned today? Most dragons are pretty fucking cool. Most. I think this might be like the most S tier and A tier candidates I've had for a video. So I guess dragons are just rad as hell. Let me know where you'd rank these dragons or if I missed any that you think deserve to be on this coolness scale. Thanks for watching.